Okay, let's talk about the mix prep process on a song like this. This is the step you go through before you actually start mixing to make sure you're starting from a nice, just clean slate. Now, like I said, I produced this track, the instrumental, in Ableton, but there's some effects that I turned off when I exported those tracks to bring them over to here. You can see we don't have any MIDI tracks going on except for that one I added at the very last minute. But for the most part, these were all rendered to audio, right? And that was done in Ableton just by selecting all the tracks and choosing export audio and then individual tracks. And it just spit out, some 50 tracks or whatever this is in a folder. And I pulled those all into Pro Tools. But it didn't quite look like this. It wasn't nearly as organized. And every single track was full length. They all looked like this, every single thing all the way down. So I went and cut through the silence. I cut that out. Pro Tools can do it automatically, which saved me a lot of time. You don't have to do that. I just like it because it lets me tell at a really quick glance where stuff is in a song. If everything was just solid blocks across the whole way, I'd have to be reading waveforms a lot more, and that takes time. So I brought in all the tracks, I cut out the silence, and then I started to organize. I started to organize in terms of instrument groups. In Pro Tools, I use folder tracks a lot, and you can see, I'll make these a little bigger. I have an instrumental folder group. Let's actually break all of these down just so you can see kind of just how simple a mix this breaks down to be. I'm going to hide these three for a second. We'll talk about what those are in a minute. You saw some other people's songs in here. For one, this is actually just the demo mix I had of Overthrown. This was like the first mix I did. You can see the beginning of it is actually still active, and it's in my mix session. It's a different mix in this mix session, and that's because I just liked how the intro sounded from that mix. This part was actually in Ableton, not in Pro Tools, and I just couldn't get it to sound like that in Pro Tools, even with the exact same mastering chain. So I was like, forget it. I'm just going to pull that in and use that as the intro. So I did. Now, in our instrumental, we only have a few actual instrument groups. We have drums, which there's only 3 tracks on this group. We have kick and snare, and tambourine. That's it. That's all that's going on in drums. Bass is also very simple. We have our main bass, and then we have our intruder bass. That's it. Synths is kind of a catch-all for a lot of other things you can see. We have everything from our razor beeps. I even put the guitars in here because it felt weird leaving them out on their own in the cold just because they're not technically synthesizers. But this is where I put kind of everything that lives in the mid-range. That's not, it's not basses, it's not drums, it's melodic stuff and chord stuff that lives in the mid-range of the frequency spectrum. And it all felt like it could kind of coexist here. And then I have effects. And these are those samples like the whooshes, the sub drops. All of that stuff lives in here. And then I have a mix bus. I'll talk about this in a second because it has to do with the way I handle routing my master channel. Well, one moment. I have that Overthrown intro that we're grabbing from the old mix. I have a click track just to help me keep time when I'm adjusting vocal timing or anything. And then I have the vocals. And in the vocals, we have spoken words. This is everything from Gabriel's voice and Intruder's voice.
Me first with Twisted.
And that's it. In our verse, we have this.
The ancient pretender.
It's these singing parts. And you'll notice I have separate vocal tracks for every part of my song, even though they're not overlapping with each other. I could have done this all on just a few vocal tracks, right? But this lets me handle different parts of the mix differently without using a ton of automation. I don't have to move the volume up and down, for the chorus, bring it up so it's louder in the chorus and then quieter. The chorus is just different tracks. And I just mix those differently on my mixing board. Easy. So have different groups of instruments for different sections of your song. It looks like a lot, and it looks absolutely crazy, but it saves you so much time and so many headaches. So we have verse, we have the lead pre-chorus,
A new tradition.
and the backing vocal pre-chorus,
Forsaking the shepherd.
and then finally the chorus.
Because your world's been overthrown.
I sometimes use the chorus as just a scream bus as well. So like, for example, during the Your Foolishness Will Be Your Legacy part,
Your foolishness will be your legacy.
there's some screams and they're just in the chorus track. That's not like great practice, but it's okay.
Your foolishness will be your legacy.
So that's all there. You can see I trimmed these so tightly. I just clipped every single spot.
Your foolishness will be your legacy. Commit to the crime of opposing me.
You can see I just cut out all of that. Okay, let's talk about these tracks, because here we have Overthrown. This is the rest of that mix. And then we have Misa Misa. This is a song by Corpse, or Corpse Husband. And then Power Glove by Knife Party, which is like one of my favorite EDM tracks. These are references. These are things for me to listen to just to keep my head in the game, just to keep context for what a good mix sounds like. Because when you're sitting with this mix for even 10, 20 minutes, you can lose sight of what music sounds like when you're listening to the same song over and over again. So I'm not going to play these because it's copyrighted and I don't own those songs. But here is my original mix of Overthrown that I was comparing to. This is the one I did out of Ableton, and I wanted my Pro Tools mix to sound largely like it. I just feel like I can get more detailed, accuracy in Pro Tools than I personally can in Ableton. Not because Ableton can't. I just am personally more fluent in Pro Tools. So this was the mix I did in Ableton. I want to make sure I kept the vibe and the feeling of it. So here was the original mix. And my Pro Tools mix. I think it sounds a lot cleaner and a lot more open, which is what I wanted. This has aggression to it. It has a lot, but it also feels a little crowded in the mid-range. They each have their own merits, but I like what I ended up shipping, so that's good. But let's talk about this mix bus and the master track. Because why don't I just have my master chain on my master channel? Why does my mix bus have it? And that's because of these references. If I had these on my master bus, when I listen to, Misa Misa or Power Glove or something, or just my old Overthrown mix, it would be going through my mastering chain. It would be getting mastered again. And then I'm really not comparing it to my master. I'm comparing an overcompressed version of it to my master. And so that's not a helpful comparison. I need a way for it to get out to the master channel, out to my speakers and my headphones without going through my master chain. So instead, check it out. All the reference tracks go straight to my output. Not this one. Output 1 and 2. That's straight to my speakers and my headphones. Everything else, if you look, every top level thing, the instruments and the vocals, they're going to my mix bus. Those are going right here. You could see. And meanwhile, if I play this, only goes to my master bus. It doesn't go through my mix. And so it's not going through this mastering chain. I talk about that a bit more in the reference mixing section of Elemental Mixing, so be sure to go take a look at that lesson. This is such an essential part of mixing, is having good reference tracks. So grab a few songs that you really love the mix of in the genre you're producing, or at least kind of nearby the genre you're producing. There isn't really a good analog for this song. There's nothing that quite sound. I'm not trying to pat my own back here, but it's a weird sounding song. There wasn't a good reference that I could think of. So I grabbed this funk track and an old progressive house song from Knife Party. And somewhere in between those is, I think, what maybe where this song lives. But yeah, use reference tracks as much as you can. It's so incredibly helpful. Now, let's talk about the actual mix. Let's walk through the entire mix of this song.